What is going on, everybody? I am here today with a great friend of mine, Jose Gardner, another Marine. And Jose, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
All right. While I am long-winded, I'll try to keep it short. But yeah, Jose Gardner grew up, not exactly born in the South, but raised most of my life in the South, in a very kind of military oriented family. You know, grandpa was a corpsman, uncle's in the Air Force, dad was in the Marines. And so, natural plan. I went to college not thinking the military was for me. And then it only took about 3 months before I was like, nope, it is for me. And so I ended up joining the Marines, joined the reserves, the guys that want to play Army. But no, joined the Marine Corps Reserves and got to a chance to go overseas. I went to Afghanistan in 2011 and kind of really put a perspective on life in a lot of ways, and made a lot of great connections that way. And so I did about 5.5 years, which sounds weird, but towards the end of my career was during the whole riff that you can remember back around 2015. So it kind of let me let's switch gears a little bit as I kind of went on to furthering my education. So I moved out west, and it's kind of how our paths ended up crossing eventually. But military was definitely a great kind of founding block for where I'm at today. So,
Good. I love that. And when you say RIF, tell us a little bit. What is the RIF?
So just a reduction in forces. So basically, if you remember kind of back during the Obama budget cuts and the whole fear mongering of they're shutting down the government and all that,
Yep.
what it allowed is I'd already moved, or I was planning on moving out to Utah for grad school. And if you can imagine, everybody hates a transfer in units, and especially when you only got 6 months or 8 months, 9 months, whatever I had left on my contract. But what it allowed was kind of one of those voluntary early out programs, where if you didn't have any administrative health or behavioral issues, they're like, hey man, you're free to move on. So applied for that, and it was just a great time in life. I just got married, and kind of that way I could go out and focus on kind of my further in education, and it really worked out well for me. So, but I did get to experience that overseas deployment and the combat time and a lot of things. So I definitely got everything I wanted out of the Marine Corps, and I hope I left it maybe a little better than I found it, and went on about my way. So.
Well, just knowing you, I know that you did. And yeah, I love having just somebody that was in the reserves too, because I think traditionally speaking, before I got in, and one, I actually considered being in the reserves, and inevitably decided to go active duty. But after the whole 9/11, it felt like, even just like with your deployment, you guys deployed, you guys were on active duty for a really long time. I mean, you guys might as well have been active duty even in your
Yeah.
time in. He's being quote unquote reserves.
Yeah, I always joke. I did the program, the 92-day program, they call it, where you can get out of boot camp and go back to school for 2 semesters before you go on to combat school and MOS school. And about a week and a half after graduating boot camp, I showed up to my first drill, and they said we were going active duty in like 3 months. And I was like, well, this didn't pan out very well. So I ended up spending like 2.5 years of my first 3 years in on active duty. And as soon as I got back, the regimental sergeant major showed up and was like, yeah, 4th Marine Division isn't deploying anymore. So I was like, oh, great. I've got over half my contract left, and it's going to be peacetime Marine Corps. So it's like, that's not what any Marine wants, but it worked out all right. So
Man, well, I just always felt so bad because we would be overseas talking to reservists that, even if you got deployed over, like you said, for 2.5 years, it would just seemed like a crazy thing. Whereas for me joining up, or anybody else on active duty, at least you knew what you were doing for 4 years. You might not have known what you were doing, but you knew the military was going to tell you. So I don't know. I had a lot of respect for you guys doing what you did, because it's, in my opinion, it's a lot of the same stuff that we did, just from kind of got told what to do in a little bit different way. So,
yeah, right. Yeah, no, actually, I was able to opt out of the deployment too, because I didn't have an MOS, and they couldn't deploy me without an MOS. So I actually dropped my next semester of school to go back to MOS school to be qualified in time too. So it's just a weird thing where, like, there's a lot of stuff that administratively happens in the military that you don't even realize is a thing till you're in the middle of it. So like, I had to force. I was like, no, like, sign me up for school, like, I'm going. But they were like, no, we can't send you. And I, like, basically, I flexed as much as a little Lance Corporal could, and then I let go. So, but
Lance corporals run the Marine Corps, though, so that's what they always say. Man, that's incredible. Well, thanks for sharing that and a little bit about your background. And I'd love to just share everybody too, just how we met. I was at a time in my life, I moved up to Colorado. I'd been out for some time, but I'd always heard about shooting competitions and just different things. I think this was right when PRS was wasn't brand new, but it was fairly new. Different styles of shooting competitions like that. I went out to one and had nothing. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no gear, not really anything. Man, tell us about how we met at a shooting competition, Jose. Just what can you remember from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time, for anyone not listening, there's a ton of different shooting disciplines, from pistol, shotgun, rifle. But then what you don't realize is it's not just you're a shotgun shooter, rifle shooter, pistol shooter. Then there's just all these various disciplines within it. So when you think, long range shooting for rifle, you think, the Marines are going to say, oh, Carlos Hathcock. Well, what he would shoot, I'm not even super familiar with that side of the world, but it's like high power and service rifle and all those things, which is very different from how you and I met. Well, we shoot, when you use the term PRS, it's called the Precision Rifle Series. So there's this kind of discipline that's grown over the last decade that's almost like the wild, wild west with really, really, really accurate rifles. So instead of just sitting there and shooting 10 rounds in 10 minutes, you're shooting 10 to 15 rounds in 2 minutes from logs and tripods and backs of trucks and at moving targets and all these things. And so that's how you and I met. And at the point in time that you and I met, I was kind of in my, say, sophomore year of it. It was a thing where I was really gung-ho. I was shooting, I think I ended up shooting like 27 matches in that year, which wasn't even as much as some friends. But when you put into, context that I have a day life and there's only 52 weekends in a year and I still have to practice. I mean, that was a lot of shooting that year. And so the match you and I met at, which is just what I would really love to kind of educate people on, maybe listening to this today, is what we kind of call local matches. And it was a really low key match. So I kind of went to that match because sometimes you just need a breather, but you still want to shoot, right? So that match was a lot lower pressure than maybe some of the other stuff I was into. So it was just a local match put on there in Northern Colorado. Joe Blows can show up with hunting rifles, and a lot of them did. That and
I definitely.
But it's a great time that nobody expects to know your name, and nobody's out there wearing sponsored jerseys and stuff, and just there's some targets out there at distance, and you're all supporting each other and clapping and helping each other out and giving tips, and it's just a great time for kind of camaraderie, and so that's how you and I crossed paths. So
yeah, man, I remember really specifically that time because you talk about people showing up. I definitely didn't know what I was jumping into, and unfortunately I found myself at that local match, that local level, because everybody was so friendly. I was so blown away with how friendly everybody was. I mean, everybody was willing to just jump in, give us a hand. I remember you and Brett, another buddy of ours, let me jump behind his rifle. I remember two things I remember from that conversation, because I was wearing my old tricolor boonie. Number one, you said, watch out when you shoot that, because you're going to buy it. You're going to go get one. And sure enough, that's the rifle that I own today. But number two, I remember you challenging, like, there's no way you earned that tricolor. I was like, yeah, no, actually, this was one of the last issued tricolor boonies, or where they were actually using them. I guess it wasn't issued. I had to go buy it. But nonetheless, it was back when we were using tricolors was that transition over.
Yeah, I remember. Well, the main thing is, I mean, if anybody that knows you, that has seen your face rather than listening to you on this podcast, you're a little bit of a baby face anyways, but that was 6 years ago. And you could have convinced me you were younger than I was. And, I shot iron sights in boot camp, but I, never polished boots or anything. So all of my gear now is tricolor just because I love it, like all my shooting gear. So yeah, I do remember that boonie that you had customized, and I was like, I guess I did ask you. There's no way you earned that tricolor. Yeah. I just assumed it was like a family hand-me-down or something. But.
No, it made me love it even more. I loved it. But it was back in the day when it was at ARS. We had to actually take our boonies and they let us customize them a little bit just for that at school, and I always held on to it. So anytime I do anything, I always bring it out with me. But man, one thing I wanted to circle up. I appreciate you sharing all of this, and as we were talking just last week, I wanted to share with everybody, because I think you and I have had several conversations about how impactful something like this, jumping into a local shooting competition, how meaningful, how impactful it could be for veterans. And man, I'd love to hear your point of view. Why do you think this would make sense for veterans in general to jump in and go check out a local shooting match? What would be the benefit of that in your opinion?
Yeah. So I guess maybe I'll introduce a disclaimer before I make a lot of maybe some more generalizations that I'm going to make through this discussion. But I think driven people are going to be driven people, and slackers are going to be slackers. But in the military as a whole, I think it creates potential to bring out the most driven individual you can be, right? There's just a certain level of force discipline where mediocre people become average, and above, excellent people really kind of make their way to the top, right? There's just, we go through things, a life experience, regardless of branch, right? I mean, I can sit here and beat my chest and talk about the Marine Corps, but the reality is, regardless of branch, it's a life experience that not everybody gets, right? And so you have, at one level or another, been asked to do something more. And so I think you and I have had the discussion about, you can kind of put it in context of the cheesy movie, The 300, but we're at a weird time in life for the first time, such a micro time in civilization where warriors are not a lifetime class. It's like you do this thing and then you transition back, right? Every other civilization in history, warrior's been a lifelong thing until you become a, village elder or whatever. And so we're really kind of asked to like turn on this switch of something very, kind of very stoic and very like down to the, bottom of our DNA, and then you turn it off and just ask to go be back and be normal and professional and no dark humor and all these things. And so I think it's something sometimes where there's just still this little itch, this little thing that's been turned on inside of us, where I think competition in general, right? I mean, I've done a lot of things, competitive shooting, competitive ultimate frisbee, wrestling, some different things. I think hearing your story, like, you went and did, water polo in college or whatever, but we all have that drive to just like excel at something because we've all been told you have to be good, right? Like the military, like one thing we don't appreciate is like military just tells you you've got to be just a little bit better at all points in your life. You can be the best Marine out there. You're told you got to be a little bit better. And so that competitive drive is just there. And so for me, I found that for the shooting sports, it really scratches that itch of allowing you to hone a skill. And frankly, especially if you come from the combat arms side, I mean, let's call a spade in any of the branches, you kind of, it allows you to scratch that itch of kind of the more tactical feel, right? I'm not saying that like your shooters are going to go out and be operators, but at the end of the day, to me, a veteran feels more natural behind a gun than a golf club. So, for me, those are really great starting points for why competitive shooting makes sense for veterans to plug into something that allows them to focus outside of the 9-to-5 work, schedule. So,
man, I love that. Was just beautifully, beautifully said. And I don't know that I've ever looked at it that deep of a level, and why I love it so much and why I love getting out there and doing it. And with that too, one thing that I was going to share later, but it feels relevant right now. You said it's not going to maybe not scratch that full on tactical itch. The one thing that blew me away was how good some of these civilian shooters are. I mean, there are some really good shooters out there that never had a military background. I mean, one thing I was going to tell people, just you better leave your ego outside of that range because you're going to get your butt. You're going to get it. You're going to get your butt handed to you. I mean, it's impressive to see the quality of shooter that never been in the military. There's just some really good shooters out there.
Yeah. Yeah. This weekend, there's this thing called the AG Cup, if anybody wants to Google it, but it's kind of like the Super Bowl of Super Bowls of the precision rifle world. And an armorer for the Army Marksmanship Unit, not even actually an official shooter, just won it. First time it's ever been shot perfect on the last day. Didn't miss a shot. 102 shots on the last day. Didn't miss a shot. But before that, you got to shoot for 2 days to make your day into the final day. And this like 16-year-old kid from Washington won like 4 of the 20 stages to qualify. I mean, that's 20, it's 20% of the stages was won by a 16-year-old kid, a 17-year-old kid, like, so yeah. I mean, so like you said, you can leave your ego at the door because, there's a doctor out there that outshoots you and there's a welder out there that outshoots you, but there's also a lot of military people that really excel, so.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and that's what I wanted to bring up just to make sure people knew that there's a lot of welcoming arms out there, but you better leave your ego because there's some people that help you and they're going to kick your butt and they're going to show you how they did it. That's what I loved about it is there's some really, really great shooters out there. But I love how you frame that up and how it goes and it scratches that itch. For me, the other thing I loved about it was the camaraderie of it. There's the local matches, like you said, where you go out for a morning half day shoot where you don't have to have a huge time commitment to get out there to go do it. And then I've done a couple of shoots with you that are multi-day shoots where you go out there and then you bring out your RV and go camping and everybody's you shoot all day and everybody has some beers and man, you just smoked a brisket that one time. Didn't you bring a brisket out and smoke a brisket?
Yeah, we used to do that every year. We'd do something. We'd sous vide steaks or smoke a brisket or whatever. Yeah. So that's the thing, right? It depends on how, you can be an obsessive person like me and just go, feet first all in and find these big multi-level 2, 3, 4 day matches, or you can start with 22 long rifle, right? I mean, maybe you live, a lot of military ends up on the East Coast after their commitment's over, and there's not a lot of places to stretch long range, but the precision 22 long rifle world is just taking over. You got guys shooting, $500 22s competing against guys with $10,000 22s, and it only takes 100 yards, and every local range has 100 yards, 50 or 100 yards. And either way, it's still equally difficult. You still got to know wind. You still got to be able to, break a clean trigger and understand your ballistics and all these things. So, like you said, the time commitment can be anything from a half day 22 shoot to a 1 day center fire shoot to 4 days with 3 or 4 guns, stretching out to 1,000, 2,000 yards. So as deep as you want to get into the rabbit hole, you can, but if it really just, you want to be around like-minded people, I mean, there's like-minded people at your, local gun range that isn't just Mr., the 30-06 1-2 World Wars, and that's how you should shoot. So, you can be a little bit more modern than that.
No, well, but that's what I love about it too, the camaraderie. I love that you can get out there and meet people. And then I think that specifically for veterans, and especially a lot of the conversations that I have on here about getting veterans to get out and meet people that not necessarily weren't veterans, that didn't do things that we did for whatever reason. And you'll see that there's some really good people out there. I think of one person in particular I met down in Colorado Springs that I don't know that I ever would have met him. Great guy. He makes cabinets for a living. Phenomenal shooter. Great dude. And that's what he does. And you would never think of him in that light until you got to meet him. And I think that there's an opportunity for veterans at a shooting match like this, not only to scratch that itch, but to also get out there and meet people that might not be veterans, and to start bridging some of those gaps, can make some connections with some people in their local area that might not be veterans.
Yeah. So I think there's, that's another point to be made. Isn't just that the shooting scratches that itch, that tactical itch, or just that, more comfortable with guns and golf clubs kind of deal. But also, I forget what the statistic is. Maybe you've looked it up, but there's something like only 4% of people in the entire American population has ever served at one point in their life or the other, right? Like, as much as veterans feel like half the people we know are veterans, the fact of the matter is we're a very small slice of society. And when you go to a golf club, we're probably either averagely or even below represented, right? So there might be, at any golf course, there might be 4% veterans, or might be less than that. But when you go to a shooting match, it's not that it's 100% veterans. Civilians love shooting. That's why we joke around America is the country that would never be invaded, because you're not invading the military, right? But when you go to a shooting match, there might be 30% veterans, right? I mean, I was at a shooting match this weekend, which, if you understand the context of the match, would make sense. But I bet 25 out of 40 teams were SF or sniper, or kind of had precision rifle for their daily job. And then, you have industry people and stuff. But even at that local match, I bet 25% of us, where I met you, were veterans. So one, it's easier to just find more like-minded people. But further than that too, when you talk about plugging in with people who are not veterans in the shooting community, at least they understand that we're overrepresented, and the non-veterans are more exposed to us, and they tend to connect with us more because there's already that just very obvious common ground where you all showed up that day for the same purpose. And so then you don't have to establish common ground. Your common ground is the activity you showed up to in the first place. And then you start asking about their kids and their day job and why they are the way they are. And it's just a little bit more seamless to kind of really find that community that wants to be there for you and you to invest in them. So.
I love it. I love that. And just how easy it makes it. Like you said, because you already have the common ground, then it starts to break off from that. And then, just kind of how we met, how we started hanging out. Obviously, we're both veterans. But we started hanging out outside of shooting. You came over and did a bunch of briskets for my son's birthday. I know you moved out of the area a little while back, but I mean, it became bigger then and more than just that shooting match. So,
I mean, the fact of the matter is we haven't shot a match together in 4 years, but we still talk and hang out, and I've still been at your house for a couple of Christmases. I mean, it's not always about shooting. So
no, but that was the whole point of the conversation was where we met though, was
right.
The shooting match. And so I appreciate you sharing all of this. And I know you've talked about a bunch of different stuff. As we start to wrap this up, what advice would you give to somebody? Because I think that's the challenge that I want to leave everybody with, is get out there. If you're so inclined and you want to make a connection, is find a local match. And
Yeah.
what advice would you give to somebody that might be sitting back saying, you know what, I'd love to, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. What advice would you give to somebody that wants to jump in and find a local match to go shoot?
Yeah. So from I guess we'll start from a mental perspective is just, let's say realistic expectations, right? You may have been, top shot in your platoon one time at, qual range or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, no matter which shooting discipline is, you're probably not going to be the best day one, right? You may be a natural, but part of it's just figuring it out. And so the realistic expectation is when you find that local match, show up willing to ask a lot of questions and not yell, puff your chest about what you know. Right. I mean, even what you do know, that's fine. Like suck up everything from everybody else. And so, be willing to show up to that local match, find that local match and do so with the right mentality, a lot of questions, a lot of humility. And then as you get good, you can, let your ego grow accordingly. But the other thing is also that just maybe don't go spend a ton of money or be daunted by let's say the barriers of entry. Every single match director that I know within the precision rifle world, within the 3-gun world, within the precision 22 world, they all tell you, man, all you really need to do is show up with a gun and ammo, and all the rest of the gear will lend you. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't have guns and ammo, dude, I've got no telling how many extra precision guns laying around. For you, your second match ever, you weren't quite outfitted correctly the first time, and I just brought you everything, including the gun, rifle, and ammo. I was like, dude, just come see how you feel about it. And I'm not the only one. That is not to say I'm a saint. I'd say I'm the rule, not the exception, right? I mean, the guys that really dive into this, they want to be great ambassadors to the sport. I'm lucky to be able to partner with several companies that kind of recognize that, and they want to help me out, helping other people out. And so, man, if I've got it, you can use it. And like I said, that's the rule, not the exception most of the time at these local matches, because precision rifle shooting especially is a real grassroots thing. And it starts at those locals where, these guys kind of get the bug and then they get big and go, high end. And then maybe more from a logistical perspective, well, how do I find them? Because not every range has got it. Well, I mean, it's pretty easy, right? PrecisionRifleSeries.com, NationalRifleLeague.com, or even shameless personal plug. But if you want to contact me, I mean, any Joe Blow out there listening to this right now, I've never met you before. I'm really easy to find. Look up Long Range Tactics, either on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. There's even a podcast, Long Range Tactics podcast. And I'm, I guess, one of the, let's say, core members of that, kind of the people who created it. And just look for me, Jose Gardner, on Long Range Tactics, the group, the Instagram, whatever. Say, hey, heard about this, point me in the right direction, and trust me, I will annoy my wife with how much time I spend trying to help you. So I love growing the sport, and I love people getting people into it, and especially, veterans like yourself. So mentally, just have the right attitude, which is 1, no fear, and 2, no expectation. And 3, don't go spend stupid money, borrow all the gear till you can make an educated decision. I'll let you borrow my gear forever. You should pay the ammo and I'll let you borrow whatever until you make the right decisions about what you want to buy. And then, from a more logistic perspective, it's really easy to find by literally Google National Rifle League, Precision Rifle Series, Long Range Tactics, Sniper's Hide. There's just tons of stuff out there, but none of it is named where you would obviously go looking for it. So that's my tip to you that want to go Google it right now. So,
and I love that you shared all of that. Definitely reach out to. I've literally borrowed his gear several times, especially jumping, because I thought I knew what to get. I thought I knew. I really thought that I knew what I was going to need going to a shooting competition, and I was blown away by how far off of just from the little tiny things from it. I shot with I bought an internal mag rifle, where it was just just not even close to what was needed. But that was just the unknown. So don't go spend a lot of money. Go borrow some gear, and don't be shy. Don't shy away from it, because the fact of the matter is too, most people love letting you borrow their gear, because then you can talk about how good it is. People are like, I love the rifle.
People love to brag about things they spent lots of money on. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So show up, meet somebody, and know that once you find that one person in your local area, once you find one person there, I guarantee you, they know every competition that's happening within 100, 200 mile radius of you. They know every day it's happening, when it's happening. You just got to find that one person. So it's good. Reach out to Jose. He's going to help you find that person in your local area. And thank you so much for your time, Jose. I really appreciate you. Thanks for all you do, brother.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
All right. Until next time.